Thank you. Thank you very much. Good to be here. Glad to see everybody here. All right. So who here's played a game of Monopoly? All right. For those of you unfamiliar with the board game, the purpose is basically to gain total control over the make-believe real estate market in the game. Similarly, in a real-world free market system, companies and corporations dream of obtaining full market control over the economy or an economic sector. Um, so, as Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, said, to widen the market and narrow the competition is always the interest of the dealers, meaning that companies will always seek to expand their market influence. And as the economy expands to include countless products and services, enormous corporations have emerged, gained control of market sectors, and expanded into massive entities with virtually unlimited economic and monetary power. Because of these trends, the United States government has constantly introduced new legislation limiting and controlling the acquisition of these monopolies. The question has arisen many times over the years: what is proper regulation? Um, should the government check the monopolies in their growth and in their influence, or should they be allowed to grow, unfettered, as it were? Well, the government does indeed have the requisite powers to enforce such regulation. It must be determined if they should be utilized more frequently to control monopolization, or if the government should interfere less, or if they're doing the correct amount of regulation. So, as I said, the rapid expansion of the economy throughout the history of the United States has resulted in the government realizing that private businesses, without regulation, will always seek to gain total market control by any means necessary. Um, this was seen as this ability to regulate the economy was so important that it's included in the Constitution of the United States. In Article 1, Section 8, in the third clause, it says, Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. Initially, the concern was simply gaining a firm footing in the world economy, as many nations didn't take the United States seriously. But over the years, those powers expanded to cover business as well, domestic, interstate, and private. The necessity of protecting businesses from each other was highlighted in several instrumental pieces of economic legislation. One of the most impactful government actions was the Sherman Act of 1890, which prohibits certain market control tactics such as price fixing, the operation of cartels, and corporate collusion to edge out competition or unreasonably restrain trade, as described in the United States Antitrust Law Summary. This act has been cited in many civil suits and Supreme Court cases, and is the foundation for the United States powers in regulating the economy and the way that businesses can act with each other. Now, monopolies aren't all bad. It sounds like they're all bad, but they actually develop quite regularly and quite naturally in a free market system. An example of this is the Henry Ford Motor Company. Henry Ford came up with the assembly line, a principle that we're all familiar with, that utilizes Adam Smith's principle of division of labor, specialized workers all working in sequence to produce a product faster. Because of this innovation, Ford was able to produce, more cars in 1 year than all the other manufacturers in the world combined. And that progress occurred from 1908 to 1914 and resulted in the price of Model T to drop in modern currency from 21,000 to 3,500. Because of this, the other car companies couldn't keep up, and for many years, Ford held a respective monopoly over the car industry. If you didn't drive a Ford, you were wrong for many years, and that was the way that things ran. But then other automakers caught on, and now there's pretty even competition across the board. A modern day example of this is Amazon, that occupies most of the market today. They've resulted in the death of several companies, such as Blue Apron, Borders, and Macy's is on the way down, let's be honest, right? Laughter. So, as previously stated, there is a basis and scenarios for the government to use their powers to regulate the economy. Um, in 2001, the Microsoft Corporation was taken to court for maintaining an illegal monopoly over the tech industry. They would implement restrictions on their PC abilities so they couldn't run other operating systems. Now, this wouldn't be a problem, except that Microsoft was the only hardware manufacturer, so the actual parts and components of the computer. And they would make them so that they could not run other companies' software or the programs and directives that other companies would come out with. Software browsing service Netscape died as a result of this, and AOL is, still a common household name, but who uses it, right? The Supreme Court decided that because of this, Microsoft was in violation of antitrust laws because they were illegally maintaining a monopoly by deliberately and predatorily killing their competition. So, as this is a case of the United States government using their powers to regulate what was deemed a predatory monopoly. Now, does the United States necessarily need to use those powers to regulate? According to Stefan Slokmadsen, who is a PhD fellow at the Copenhagen Business School, he said in an article published on Science Nordic, the problem with this understanding, meaning that monopolies are bad, arises when concepts are taken out of context, which often happens in economic theory. When this happens, we assume that monopolies, where there is only one provider of a unique product, are bad and harm consumers. We forget that the answer to the harm caused by monopolies depends on why there is just one provider in the first place. Leonard E. Reed, a writer for The Atlantic, echoed Slokmadsen when he said the beneficial way to become superior as a company to everyone else in providing some good or service. The bad way is to use coercive force to keep others from competing effectively and also from challenging one's position. The second part of that can be applied to the Microsoft case, whereas the first part can be applied to a later Supreme Court case in 2006, Texaco versus Dogger, where two companies teamed up and created a joint venture called Equilon, which essentially controlled the distribution and sale of their oil products in the western United States. Now, soon after this happened, 23,000 private station owners came together and sued, citing antitrust law. But since, and this is where it's a little complicated, since the pricing policy of Equilon was price fixing in a literal sense, it was not price fixing in the antitrust sense. And the distinction has to do with the parties involved. If Texaco and Shell had come together and said, hey, as Texaco and Shell, we are going to regulate the prices and sell our products at a certain prices, that's violating antitrust law. But since Equilon represented a joint investment by both companies and a third party, it did not violate those laws. So the United States did not have to exercise their powers in this case. Now, there is also the point of view that, hey, all regulation is bad regulation. The free market should be free, as in no regulation. Wouldn't markets and economies ebb and flow with consumer demand? Wouldn't monopolies rise and fall? It's an excellent question. The monopolies have been a part of the free market economics for centuries, and they'll predictably will remain to be a part of free market economics for the foreseeable future. Now, as they develop, smaller businesses will be hard-pressed to continue. Government regulations that currently limit the scope and methodology of acquisitional action will continue attempting to ensure fair competition and remove predatory actions from the economy. So, in short, monopolies in and of themselves do not pose a threat to economic stability, but they do remove the competition that enforces quality and innovation in the free market. Now, as far as and I have cited several case is to illustrate when the United States government has used their powers to regulate a predatory monopoly, and when the United States government has not used their powers to regulate a legal monopoly. Now, regarding the future, it is really up to the consumer. It is up to the people on whom the market depends, the buyers of the products. Economies thrive on multi-directional capital flow, meaning that money flows in different directions. If this narrowed to one channel between consumer and a single megacorporation, the economy would lose money. That's a basic law of supply and demand. Now, it's important to understand that with the regulations, the government isn't trying to hurt the economy. They try to ensure economic safety and fair competition. The question that the consumer has to ask themselves, that we all have to ask themselves, is what do we want the economy to look like? You know, it's important to understand that when we reset a monopoly board, it takes a few seconds. We can start a new game as soon as we want. If somebody rages and flips the board, it takes about 10 minutes to gather the pieces, put them all back together. The real-life economy takes much longer to recover from economic damage. So it's up to the consumer to really determine how the economy will fare. You know, tiny plastic houses in color-coded neighborhoods aren't on the line, but it's the health of the national economy. Whether or not efforts will be made to preserve the health of that economy remains entirely up to us. You know, today we have our reality, but tomorrow brings the result. Thank you.